Today's subject actually is a proposal. Let's suppose, don't have to like it, that the Genesis 1 account can be considered, see if it best fits what we see today as far as creation is concerned, what's most plausible. These are belief systems, yes, but which is the best on the side of science and plausibility, logic. We read the Genesis 1 account accurately. Many people don't have it accurately, so you're not even representing the Bible. A lot of people purposely misread it and show it's defective. Well, that's your editorialism. That's not what the Bible actually said. So we left off on this study, BibleStudyManuals.net, Genesis 1.htm, and then we left off at the Revised and Expanded Answers book. A great book to get. It gives you short, sweet answers, and then you can go into more depth on your own. Don Batten wrote it. Master Books, Creation Science Foundation, Green Forest, Arizona. Page 95 to 102. Some stars are millions of light years away. Since a light year is the distance traveled by light in 1 year, does this mean that the universe is very old? I thought maybe so. I just was confused. Despite all the biblical and scientific evidence for a young Earth and universe, this has long been a problem. However, any scientific understanding of origins will always have opportunities for research, problems that need to be solved. We can never have complete knowledge, and so we will always be there things around to learn. One explanation used in the past was rather complex, involving light traveling along Riemannian surfaces, an abstract mathematical form of space. Apart from being hard to understand, the average guy, then how would we know? It appears that such an explanation is not valid, since it would mean that we would see duplicates, should see duplicates of everything. Created light. Perhaps the most commonly used explanation is that God created light on its way, so that Adam could see the stars immediately without having to wait years for the light from even the closest ones to reach the earth. If he did everything else like that, like whole species with seeds and age, seeds inside that they can reproduce of their own kind, well, why couldn't he do that? Well, possibility. While we should not limit the power of God, this has some rather immense difficulties. It would mean that whenever we look at the behavior of a very distant object, what we see happening never happened at all. For instance, say we see an object of light years away which appears to be rotating, that is, the light we receive in our telescopes carries this information, recording this behavior. However, according to this explanation, the light we are now receiving did not come from the star, but was created en route, so to speak. That leaves a credibility issue, but let's investigate. This would mean that for a 10,000-year-old universe, or less, that anything we see happening beyond about 10,000 light years away is actually part of a gigantic picture show of things that have not actually happened, showing us objects which may not even exist. God's credibility is then questioned. To explain this problem further, consider an exploding star, a supernova, at, say, an accurately measured 100,000 light years away. Remember, we are using this explanation in a 10,000-year-old universe. As the astronomer on Earth watches this exploding star, he is not just receiving a beam of light. If that were all, then it wouldn't be no problem at all to say that God could have created a whole chain of photons, light particles, waves already on their way. However, what the astronomer receives is a particular, very specific pattern of variation within the light, showing him or her changes that one would expect to accompany such an explosion. A predictable sequence of events involving neutrinos, visible light, X-rays, and gamma rays. The light carries information recording an apparently real event. The astronomer is perfectly justified in interpreting this message as representing an actual reality, that there really was such an object, which exploded according to the laws of physics, brightened, emitted X-rays, dimmed, and so on, all in accord with those same physical laws. Why would we bother to learn the physical laws if it was just a Walt Disney show? Everything he sees is consistent with this, including the special patterns of the light from the star, giving us a chemical signature of the elements contained in it. Yet the light created en route explanation means that this recorded message of events transmitted through space had to be contained within the light beam from the moment of its creation or planted into the light beam at a later date, without ever having originated from that distant point. If it had started from the star, assuming that there really was such a star, it would still be 90,000 light years away from Earth. To create such a detailed series of signals in light beams reaching Earth, signals which seem to have come from a series of real events, but in fact did not, has no conceivable purpose. That God's a purposeful God. Worse, it is like saying that God created fossils and rocks to fool us and even test our faith, and they don't represent anything real, a real animal or plant that lived and died in the past. This would be a strange deception. Not the God of the Bible. Does light always travel at the same speed? An obvious solution would be a higher speed of light in the past, allowing the light to cover the same distance more quickly. This seemed at first glance a too convenient and ad hoc explanation, kind of like the evolutionists try to explain their stuff. Then some years ago, Australian Barry Setterfield raised the possibility to a high profile by showing that there seemed to be a decreasing trend in the historical observations of the speed of the light over the past 300 years or so. Setterfield and his later co-author, Trevor Norman, produced much evidence in favor of this theory. They explained that it would have affected radiometric dating results and even have caused a redshifting of light from distant galaxies, although this idea was later overturned and other modifications were also made. So we're still struggling, right? But we're getting to a point where it's more believable. Much debate has raged to and fro among equally capable people within the creationist circles about whether the statistical evidence really supports seed decay or the light decay speed or not. The biggest difficulty, however, is with certain physical consequences of the theory. If C has declined the way Setterfield proposed, these consequences should still be discernible in light from distant galaxies, but they are apparently not. In short, none of the theory's defenders have been able to answer all the questions raised. Well, we have a new creationist cosmology. Hold your horses here. Nevertheless, the seed decay theory stimulated much thinking about the issues. Creationist physicist Dr. Russell Humphreys says that he spent a year on and off trying to get the declining seed theory to work, but without success. However, in the process, he was inspired to develop a new creationist cosmology, which appears to solve the problem of the apparent conflict with the Bible's clear, authoritative teaching of a recent creation. The new cosmology is proposed as a creationist alternative to the Big Bang theory. It passed peer review by qualifying reviewers for the 1994 Pittsburgh International Conference on Creationism. Young Earth creationists have been cautious about the model, which is not surprising with such an apparently radical departure from orthodoxy. But Humphreys has addressed the problems raised. Believers in an old universe and the Big Bang have vigorously opposed the new cosmology and claim to have found flaws in it. However, Humphreys has been able to defend his model as well as develop it further. So the debate will no doubt continue. The sort of development in which one creationist theory seed decay is overtaken by another is a healthy aspect of science. The basic biblical framework is non-negotiable, as opposed to the changing views and models of fallible people seeking to understand the data within that framework. Evolutionists also often change their ideas on exactly how things have made themselves, but never whether they did. A clue. Let us briefly give a hint as to how the new cosmology seems to solve the starlight problem before explaining some preliminary terms in a little more detail. Consider that the time taken for something to travel a given distance is the distance divided by the speed it is traveling. That is, time equals distance divided by speed. When this is applied to light from distant stars, the time calculates out to be millions of years. Some have sought to challenge the distances, but this is very unlikely an answer. Astronomers use many different methods to measure the distances, and no informed creationist astronomer would claim that any errors would be so vast that billions of light years could be reduced to thousands, for example. There is evidence that our own Milky Way galaxy is 100,000 light years across. If the speed of light has not changed, the only thing left untouched in the equation is time itself. In fact, Einstein's relativity theories have been telling the world this for decades, that time is not a constant. I recall an experiment between Greenwich, England, and Denver, Colorado, where they measured the travel of light around the Earth with atomic clocks and found that because of the gravitational force being greater in Greenwich than in Denver, being a mile or high, there was a slight time differentiation for traveling the same distance. So time is affected by gravity, and we'll continue to look at this. Two things are believed with experimental support. Distort time in relativity theory. One is speed, and the other is gravity. Einstein's general theory of relativity, the best theory of gravity we have at present, indicates that gravity distorts time. This effect has been measured experimentally many times. Clocks at the top of tall buildings, where gravity is slightly less, run faster than those at the bottom, just as predicted by the equations of general relativity, GR. When the concentration of matter is very large or dense enough, gravitational distortion can be so immense that even light cannot escape. The equations of GR show that at the invisible boundary surrounding such a concentration of matter, called the event horizon, the point at which light rays trying to escape the enormous pull of gravity and bend back on themselves, time literally stands still. So, we're in the center of the universe. Light travels 100,000 light years away in terms of the speed that we direct light. But it goes from one point to the other point outside of the center of the universe. It takes 100,000 years. What about the Earth? In the center of the Earth, it might take 3 or 4 days. The force of gravity distorts the passage of time, and if it's in the center, it's an unbelievable distortion that makes it come faster. Using different assumptions, Dr. Humphrey's new creationist cosmology literally falls out of the equations of GR so long as one assumes that the universe has a boundary. Oh yeah, the universe has a boundary. In other words, that it has a center and an edge. And that if you were to travel off into space, you would eventually come to a place beyond which there was no matter. In this cosmology, the Earth is near the center, as it appears to be as we look out into space. This might sound like common sense, as indeed it is, but all modern secular Big Bang cosmologies deny this. That is, they make arbitrary assumptions without any scientific necessity that the universe has no boundaries, no edge, and no center. In this assumed universe, every galaxy would be surrounded by galaxies spread evenly in all directions on a large scale, and so, therefore, all the net gravitational forces cancel out. So the speed of light would be the same. However, if the universe has boundaries, then there is a net gravitational effect toward the center. Clocks at the edge would be running at different rates to clocks on the Earth. That would be found on the Earth, between Denver and Greenwich. In other words, it is no longer enough to say God made the universe in 6 days. He certainly did, but 6 days by which clock? If we say God's time, we miss the point that he is outside of time, seeing the end from the beginning. But to us, there's a difference. There appears to be observational evidence that the universe has expanded in the past, supported by the many phrases God uses in the Bible to tell us that at creation he stretched out, other verses say spread out, the heavens. If the universe is not much bigger than we observe, and if it was only 50 times smaller in the past than it is now, then scientific deduction based on GR means it has to have expanded out of a previous state in which it was surrounded by an event horizon, a condition known technically as a white hole, a black hole running in reverse, something permitted by the equations of GR. As matter passed out of this event horizon, the horizon itself had to shrink eventually to nothing. Therefore, at one point, this Earth, relative to a point far away from it, would have been virtually frozen. An observer on Earth would not in any way feel different. Billions of years would be available, in the frame of reference within which is traveling in deep space.